They thought you'd break the moment they walked away. They expected tears, desperation, a storm of emotions proving how much power they had over you. But what they didn't expect was silence. No reaction, no pleading, just stillness. And in that stillness, they lost something far more valuable than your attention. They lost access to your energy, the safety of your loyalty, the illusion that they were in control. You see, when someone betrays you, they often believe they're walking away on top, that they've won. But the moment they can no longer reach you, they're not the powerful one anymore. That's when the real shift happens. You're no longer reacting. You're rebuilding, quietly, deliberately, powerfully. Stoic philosophy teaches that strength isn't about fighting back, it's about mastering yourself. You didn't collapse. You didn't explode. You transformed in silence. And sometimes the most powerful message is the one you never send. So let them think you broke. Let them assume they won. Meanwhile, you rise not with noise, but with quiet strength they'll never understand. In the Stoic view, real strength doesn't show up as rage or revenge. It's not in the loud comeback, it's in the silence that follows betrayal. Why? Because the moment you react, you hand your peace over to someone else. But when you choose restraint, when you don't give them what they expect, you regain control of the only thing that truly matters, yourself. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about that. When someone betrays you, what they really want is your emotional collapse. Your breakdown validates their decision, feeds their ego, confirms their illusion of dominance. But when you respond with calm, or better yet, with silence, you're sending a different message. I'm not yours to control. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's emotional intelligence. And in a world addicted to reaction, your refusal to play the game is a revolutionary act of self-respect. This video isn't just about betrayal, it's about what happens next. How do you take that pain and turn it into quiet power? Let's go deeper. There's a particular kind of pain that cuts deeper than most. It doesn't come from strangers. It doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people you once trusted the most. The betrayal of someone you let close, that's a different kind of wound. It's not just the act, it's the shock, the disbelief. Because betrayal doesn't scream at you, it whispers in the voice you once loved. You gave them your trust, maybe even your vulnerability. And in return, they handed you silence, distance, or worse, deception. Here's the thing though, you weren't wrong for trusting them. Let me say that again, you weren't wrong. They were the ones who failed the test, not you. They were the ones who proved unworthy of the loyalty you gave so freely. There's a quote from Marcus Aurelius that fits perfectly here. Pain comes not from the thing itself, but from your estimate of it. The betrayal didn't define you. Your reaction to it does. Think about this. Why does betrayal hurt so much? Because at its core, it's not just about what was done, it's about what it meant. It challenges your perception. You start questioning your judgment, your past decisions, your ability to trust. You replay every conversation in your mind, looking for clues. You wonder, was it always fake? Was I the fool? But that's the trap. The Stoics teach us that pain is not in the event, it's in the meaning we attach to it. The betrayal is real, the hurt is valid, but we don't have to stay stuck there. Here's a perspective shift that changed everything for me. Betrayal isn't a reflection of your weakness. It's a revelation of someone else's character and a gift of clarity. Imagine you're holding a cup of clear water and someone pours in ink. It turns dark instantly. You're shocked. You didn't see it coming, but the ink was always there. It was just hidden until stirred. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't create character, it reveals it. So what do you do with that pain? The ego wants revenge. The heart wants closure. But the soul, if you listen closely, wants something else entirely: freedom. The Stoics would say, don't chase revenge, don't chase closure. Neither are within your control. What is in your control? Your response, your growth, your rebirth. You have a choice. Let betrayal break you or let it build you. Use the pain to become wiser, sharper, softer, but not naive. This doesn't mean you shut everyone out. It means you protect your peace. You learn discernment. You stop handing loyalty to people who haven't earned it. Pain is the teacher. And like Marcus Aurelius said, it's not the event, it's how you interpret it. Some people leave you in pieces so you can find the pieces of yourself you gave away. So you can rebuild not as a victim, but as someone who understands their value now more than ever. So ask yourself this: what if betrayal wasn't the end of your trust, but the beginning of your deeper wisdom? Let that pain become your clarity. Let it mark the moment you stopped giving the best of you to people who never earned even the bare minimum. Have you ever noticed how people who betray you often expect a reaction? They want the explosion, the drama, the emotional chaos. They wait for your rage, your desperate questions, your broken voice pleading for answers. But what if you gave them none of that? What if, instead of shouting, you stayed silent? Not out of weakness, not out of fear, but from a place of clarity, strength, and deep self-control. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest response you can give. See, when someone betrays you, especially someone close, they expect to have power over your emotions. They expect to see you spiral, to watch you fall apart. It feeds their ego. It justifies their guilt. Your suffering gives them meaning. But the moment you choose silence, something shifts. You reclaim the power. You show them that they no longer have access to your emotional energy. You're no longer playing their game. Now, let me be clear. I'm not talking about passive-aggressive silence. Not the kind meant to manipulate or punish. I'm talking about stoic silence, silence rooted in self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never a need to turn things upside down, inside out." That's power. To remain calm when chaos knocks at your door. To stand still when everything inside you wants to scream. Because real strength, the kind that lasts, doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need to defend itself. It simply is. In a world obsessed with reacting, with posting, with clapping back, silence has become revolutionary. Think about this. When someone hurts you, they expect noise. But your silence tells them, "You're not even worth my energy." It says, "I'm too focused on my peace to explain your betrayal back to you." It forces them to sit with their actions without the distraction of your reaction. And here's what they'll start to feel: confusion, discomfort, guilt, because silence is a mirror. It reflects everything they did and gives them nothing to hide behind. You're not fueling the fire. You've walked away and left them to stand in the smoke. And that's where the real healing begins, not for them, for you. Because every time you choose silence over reaction, you're not suppressing your rising. You're choosing emotional discipline over emotional damage. You're showing the world and yourself that you don't beg for closure, you become it. I've seen it in my own life. People who tried to hurt me, who expected chaos, found nothing but silence. At first, they were confused. Then they got uncomfortable. And eventually, they faded out because I gave them nothing to hold on to. And honestly, it was the most liberating decision I ever made. So if someone has betrayed you and you're wondering what to say, here's my suggestion. Say nothing. Let your peace speak louder than your pain. Let your calmness echo louder than any confrontation. Because silence doesn't mean you're okay with what happened. It means you've chosen yourself over their drama, your dignity over their dysfunction. And that is a level of strength they'll never understand. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who, on the surface, had no reason to hurt you? You were kind. You were consistent. You gave them no threat, at least not intentionally. So, why did they turn on you? Here's a truth most people don't talk about. People often betray not out of hatred but out of fear. They're not afraid of you as a person. They're afraid of what you represent. See, when you grow, when you hold yourself to higher standards, when you set boundaries, stay calm under pressure, and remain consistent in your values, you become a mirror that reflects their lack of growth, their instability, their emotional chaos. And some people can't handle that reflection. They don't want to be reminded of the discipline they've abandoned, of the promises they broke to themselves, of the potential they've ignored for years. So what do? They try to tear the mirror down, because it's easier to destroy what triggers your insecurity than to confront it. This is why betrayal often comes from those closest to you: family, friends, even partners. They've watched you evolve. And somewhere along the way, your growth stopped inspiring them and started threatening them. Your peace became a challenge. Your boundaries became rejection. Your self-respect became a spotlight on their self-neglect. And here's the twist. They may not even realize they're doing it. Their betrayal is often subtle at first. Passive-aggressive comments, sudden distance, sabotaging behaviors masked as concern. But make no mistake, it's a defense mechanism. They're protecting their fragile self-image, because standing next to you makes them feel small. Now, this is not to make you feel superior or arrogant. This is about awareness. Understanding that betrayal is more about them than you is a crucial part of healing. The Stoics taught this. Epictetus once said, "When someone provokes you, remember that it is your own opinion which provokes you." In other words, it's not their betrayal that defines your suffering. It's how you interpret it. And when you realize that their actions came from fear, insecurity, or unhealed wounds, you stop taking it personally. You stop replaying the conversations in your head. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" Because the answer might be, you simply grew and they didn't. That's not your fault. And it's not your job to shrink so they can feel comfortable. Let me give you a personal example. Years ago, I lost a close friend, not to an argument, not to a betrayal in the traditional sense, but to quiet resentment. As I focused on my goals, leveled up my habits, and changed my environment, they pulled away. At first, I thought I did something wrong. But over time, I realized I had simply become a mirror they didn't want to look into. They couldn't handle the contrast between their stagnation and my growth. And instead of rising with me, they chose to walk away. That hurt, but it also set me free. Because once you understand that betrayal is often rooted in someone else's fear of facing themselves, you stop chasing closure. You realize the real victory isn't getting them back. It's not proving your worth. The real victory is becoming someone who keeps growing anyway. So if someone has betrayed you, ask yourself this: was it really about you? Or did you simply become too bright for the room they were trying to stay dim in? Your light isn't the problem. Their fear of it is. Don't dim yourself to fit back into their comfort zone. Grow louder, shine brighter, and let their absence become proof that you're on the right path. Here's something no one tells you when your heart is breaking. Sometimes betrayal is not a curse, it's a filter. It doesn't just hurt you, it cleanses your life. Think about it. Some betrayals feel like they shattered your world, but in time, you realize they removed someone who couldn't handle your evolution. Someone who would have held you back, quietly, constantly, without you even knowing. Yes, it stings. Yes, it feels unfair. But what if that betrayal was life's way of saying, you can't take them where you're going? Sometimes we try so hard to keep people in our lives just because of history, shared memories, loyalty, comfort. But growth isn't always comfortable. And not everyone is meant to grow with you. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, when someone acts badly, it's because they've judged it to be right. They betrayed you because, in their mind, it made sense. They justified it. Maybe they saw you rising and felt small. Maybe your strength made them confront their weakness. Either way, they made their choice. But here's the shift. You don't need to carry their choice like a burden. You can carry it like a filter. It showed you who's not aligned with your values. It made space for people who respect your boundaries, your growth, your light. Let me give you an example. A woman I coached once told me she was devastated after her business partner, her best friend, stabbed her in the back. They built something together, years of trust. But as she grew more confident and decisive, her partner began to sabotage her success behind closed doors. It almost destroyed her, until she saw it for what it was, a filter. She rebuilt, stronger, without the weight of betrayal hiding in her team. So if someone has betrayed you, what if you stopped asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and started asking, "What did this reveal to me?" You may find that betrayal didn't break you, it revealed your strength. It showed you who didn't belong on the next level of your life. And that's a blessing in disguise. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable some people get when you stop reacting? Not yelling, not explaining, just silence. You see, silence isn't just the absence of noise. To a manipulative person, silence is starvation. It cuts off the one thing they crave most, your emotional response. Why? Because the manipulator needs your reaction to feed their control. They twist your words, provoke your anger, then play victim, all to stay in charge of the story. But when you stop reacting, when you go quiet, you break the cycle. They can't twist what you didn't say. They can't spin silence into guilt. And that terrifies them. Think about this. Silence forces them to sit with themselves. No distraction, no one to blame, no chaos to hide in. And for someone who's been living off manipulation, that's like standing in front of a mirror they've spent their whole life avoiding. I once heard a therapist say, the most powerful boundary you can set is no longer participating in dysfunction. That's what silence does. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you've lost. It means you're no longer willing to dance with someone who steps on your peace. This is Stoicism in action. As the Stoic Marcus Aurelius taught, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. So instead of firing back, you rise above. You stay centered. You don't let their chaos drag you into war. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked away from someone not with anger, not with drama, but with calm silence? And watched how loud they became after? That's fear. That's panic. Because without your energy, they lose their grip. And without your participation, they have to face the reality they tried to avoid. That their power was never real. It only existed in your reaction. So when they try to bait you, and you say nothing, when they expect a fight, and you give them peace, you're not just protecting yourself. You're resetting the rules. Silence becomes your shield, your strength, your quiet rebellion, and sometimes the loudest message you can send is nothing at all. There's a quiet kind of strength that most people overlook. It's not in the shouting, not in the clever comebacks, not even in the perfectly crafted defense. It's in the pause, the moment you decide not to react. Because every time you don't respond to a jab, a provocation, a guilt trip, you're doing something powerful. You're choosing to protect your energy. And energy is everything. You see, not reacting doesn't mean you're weak or afraid. It means you're in control. It means you've learned that peace is more valuable than being right. Let me ask you this. How many times have you walked away from an argument and thought, I shouldn't have said that? Or worse, why did I let them get to me? What if, next time, you just chose silence? That's not surrender. That's strategy. In Stoic philosophy, there's a core principle from Epictetus. It is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. It's not the comment that hurts you. It's the meaning you attach to it. It's your reaction that fuels the fire. So when you decide not to respond, you're not ignoring the situation. You're drawing a boundary. You're saying, this doesn't deserve my peace. Think of it this way. Imagine you're holding a bucket of water. Every time someone triggers you, they're asking for a sip, a piece of your energy. You can pour it out, or you can keep it for yourself, for the people who truly matter. When you stop giving away your reactions, you start reclaiming your power. I've learned this the hard way. In the past, I used to jump in every time someone misunderstood me, criticized me, or tried to stir conflict. But all it did was drain me. Now, I pause, I breathe, and most of the time, I choose not to respond. And something amazing happens. The chaos no longer controls me. You become untouchable, not because nothing affects you, but because you choose what deserves your energy. So next time someone tries to pull you into their storm, try this. Say nothing. Feel everything. But protect your peace. Because silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom in action. Sometimes the most powerful move is to walk away. Not with anger, not with drama, just quiet distance. Because when you leave, something profound happens not to you, but to them. They lose the energy that once kept them alive. And often, they don't even realize it until it's gone. You see, some people don't love you. They love your attention, your reactions, your emotional labor. They feed off your presence like a parasite feeds off a host, silently, subtly, but constantly. You give, they take. You explain, they distort. You try to understand, they manipulate. But when you stop showing up, when you stop engaging, explaining, defending, fixing, it's like pulling the plug on a system that only works if you keep supplying the power. No need for revenge. No need for confrontation. Just removal. That alone is enough. It reminds me of a lesson I learned the hard way with someone I once thought I couldn't live without. They drained me emotionally and mentally, but I kept staying. I thought walking away would make me the villain, but staying made me a shell of who I was. And the day I left, not with a speech, not with a scene, just quietly, was the day I reclaimed my life. They tried to pull me back, of course. With guilt, with blame, even with charm. But I had already discovered the truth. When you stop giving them access to your soul, their illusion of power collapses. And here's what's wild, they're not angry because you hurt them. They're angry because you stopped letting them hurt you. Stoicism teaches us this simple but profound idea. Don't waste your energy trying to fix people who benefit from staying broken. Instead, protect your peace. Guard your energy like it's gold, because it is. So, if you're watching this and you're exhausted from trying to hold something together that keeps falling apart, ask yourself, what if the most courageous thing isn't fighting harder, but finally walking away? Because sometimes your absence is the message, and your silence is the consequence. Let me say this straight. Choosing peace over arguments doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. There comes a point in life where you no longer feel the need to prove your intentions, explain your values, or defend your boundaries, not because you don't care, but because you finally do. You care about your energy. You care about your mental clarity. You care about your peace. People may say, you've changed. They'll say you're distant. You don't engage like you used to. But they're missing the point. You're not punishing anyone with silence. You're just done sacrificing your emotional well-being to keep dead conversations alive. This isn't cruelty. It's self-respect. There was a time in my life when I felt the need to respond to everything. If someone misunderstood me, I explained. If they attacked me, I defended. If they pushed, I pushed back, all in the name of being fair. But it was exhausting. I was constantly reacting, constantly explaining, constantly justifying myself to people who were never really listening. Then one day, I stopped. Not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but because I realized not every battle is mine to fight, and not every opinion needs a rebuttal. Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius said, "You always own the option of having no opinion." And there's real power in that. Because silence isn't about shutting people out, it's about shutting out the noise. So the next time someone accuses you of being cold or emotionally unavailable because you no longer argue, just smile gently. You're not cold. You're clear. Clear on who deserves your energy. Clear on when to walk away. Clear on the fact that your peace is more valuable than proving a point. Here's a question I ask myself often. If responding to them costs me my peace, is it still worth it? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. So, if you've chosen to stay quiet not because you're afraid, but because you've grown to honor that, you're not running, you're rising. And from that higher ground, everything becomes a lot clearer. You don't always need to get even. You don't need revenge, loud exits, or dramatic confrontations. Because karma doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly like a shadow they didn't notice was following them. At first, everything seems the same. They laugh, they move on, they pretend nothing happened. But slowly, the cracks begin to show. People start to question them. The trust they once manipulated begins to fade. Their carefully crafted mask, it slips, and sometimes it falls off entirely. And here's the thing, you're not even there to witness it. You're out living your life, healing, growing, thriving, while they're left to sit in the very chaos they created. This is the real weight of consequence. Not punishment from the outside, but unraveling from within. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, wrote, "Every guilty person is his own hangman." And if you've ever watched someone slowly destroy themselves with their own lies, you know exactly what he meant. Guilt has a way of echoing in silence. It doesn't need an audience. It plays in their mind over and over long after the damage is done. I've seen it in people who once hurt others and walked away smug. Months, years later, their relationships fall apart. Their reputations start to rot from the inside. They become paranoid, restless, always looking over their shoulder. Not because someone is chasing them, but because the truth is, and here's the twist, karma isn't about punishment. It's about balance. It's not fueled by hate. It's fueled by cause and effect, like gravity. You throw something up, eventually, it comes down. So if someone betrayed you, manipulated you, or used you, but you chose to walk away in silence, know this, you didn't lose. You just stepped out of the blast radius. Let the universe handle the rest. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Just move forward. Let them deal with the weight of their own actions. Let the silence do the talking. Karma doesn't knock. It just enters when the time is right. And when it does, you won't need to say, "I told you so." Their life will say it for you. Let me tell you a true story. A woman loved a man who played with her heart like it was a game. He manipulated, controlled, gaslit. And each time she cried, each time she doubted herself, he smiled not always on the outside, but deep inside. Because manipulators don't always want love. They want control. They feed off your confusion, your fear, your constant need to prove your worth. But one day, something inside her shifted. No final fight, no screaming match, no warning. She just left in silence. No explanation, no closure. She simply vanished from his life. And at first, he felt victorious. He thought, "She's weak, she ran, I won." Within weeks, he replaced her, posted smiling pictures with someone new, wrote vague captions like, "Peace, finally." But what he didn't realize was that the silence she left behind wasn't weakness. It was karma. Not the kind that crashes down like thunder, but the kind that seeps in slowly, day by day. Because something strange started happening. Every new relationship he tried collapsed. At first, he blamed the women. They're too emotional. They're not loyal like she was. They don't understand me. But the truth? It wasn't them. It was him. He was the constant. The same games, the same patterns, the same manipulation. But now, no one stayed. And the more he tried to recreate what he once had, the more it slipped away. Because the energy she brought, her patience, her love, her presence, wasn't something he could fake or force. It was real. And it was gone. Meanwhile, she healed. Quietly, she built a peaceful life, surrounded by people who respected her boundaries. She laughed again, not because someone else saved her, but because she saved herself. She never reached out, never posted a cryptic quote, never tried to show him she'd moved on, because she had. And that silence, it echoed louder than any words ever could. This is where Stoicism meets real life. The ancient Stoics taught us, you don't have to react to every injustice. You don't have to fight back every time you're disrespected. Sometimes the greatest strength is in simply walking away. No revenge, no performance, just peace. When someone shows you who they are, believe it. But when you walk away from a manipulator, do it without fanfare. Because they thrive on drama. They want to be the center of your world, even if it's a war zone. Take that spotlight away, and they're left in the dark. Have you ever had someone come back into your life, but instead of feeling flattered or hopeful, you just feel nothing? They send a message. They say they've been thinking, that they miss you, that they didn't realize what they had until it was gone. But here's the truth. They don't really miss you. They miss the control they once had over you. They miss the version of you who bent over backwards. The one who over-explained, who forgave again and again. Who stayed up at night wondering, was it my fault? What they miss is access. And when you no longer give them that access, something powerful happens. You're not the same person they left behind. You've grown. You've healed. You've stopped needing their validation to feel whole. And that, to them, is terrifying. You see, people often come back when the silence starts to echo in their own lives. Not because they had a sudden moral awakening, but because the world doesn't tolerate them the way you once did. And this is where your real power lies, not in rejecting them with fire or giving them a piece of your mind, but in not being there anymore. No performance, no dramatic goodbye, just quiet absence. That's what they never expected. Because the version of you they used to know always responded, always explained, always gave them another chance. But now, your silence is the closure. You don't need to slam the door. The door has already closed itself, and you've walked miles beyond it. And maybe that's what they can't handle. They're not grieving the loss of a relationship. They're grieving the loss of control, of comfort, of being able to get to you whenever they want it. Think about it. If someone truly valued you, they wouldn't have risked losing you in the first place. People don't wake up one day and change, they come back because life stopped going their way. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harm." That's not just a quote, it's a way of life. It means you decide what gets to touch you. You choose your response, your peace, your boundaries. So when they return, hoping to stir up old emotions, you don't have to respond with anger. You don't need to craft the perfect reply. You don't even need to say a word. Because when you've truly healed, you don't seek closure, you are closure. You become a version of yourself that no longer needs to prove anything. And if they really look closely, they'd see it in your eyes, in your posture, in your silence. They would see a person who reclaimed their power not by fighting, but by walking away and never turning back. You're not the same person anymore. And that's not something they can fix, undo, or manipulate. That's something you built piece by piece every time you chose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and self-respect over desperation. So the next time they reach out, remember, it's not about love. It's about leverage. and you've already taken that away. You don't have to hate them. You don't have to forgive them either. You simply outgrew them. And when someone comes back to a place you've already left, they're not coming back to you. They're coming back to who you used to be. But you're no longer there. There's a reason why every toxic person's biggest fear is being ignored. Not hated. Not confronted. Just forgotten. Because hate still means they matter. But silence means they've lost access to your mind. And that's when their world starts to fall apart. So if you've ever walked away from someone who tried to break you and they acted like they didn't care, let time tell the truth. Let karma unfold at its own pace. You don't need to watch. You don't need to wait. Just keep living. And remember this, your silence may feel small, but to a manipulator, it's the loudest sound they'll ever hear. Because it says, I no longer need you. I no longer fear you. I am free. And nothing destroys a manipulator more than knowing they can't touch you anymore. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. No explanation. No long messages. No dramatic closure. Just silence and a life lived well. You don't argue. You don't defend. You don't try to make them understand. You just stop responding. You move forward quietly, steadily, unapologetically. And that silence, that's what they never saw coming. Because the old you might have tried to fix it. You might have poured out your heart, tried to explain your side, begged to be understood. But the version of you that has healed the version walking in self-respect doesn't need to prove anything anymore. You see, they didn't just lose you. They lost access to you. And that's a different kind of loss. Because people who once had power over you, emotional, mental, even spiritual power, will always feel the void once you reclaim that access. It's like they're knocking on a door, but there's no one left inside to answer. Not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, but because the chapter is closed, the lesson is learned, and the story no longer includes them. And here's the part they don't understand. Your silence is not a punishment. It's protection for you. You're not trying to hurt them. You're trying to heal yourself. And real healing often happens in private, without announcements, without applause. We live in a world where everything demands a reaction. Every slight, every insult, every betrayal, people expect a comeback, a response, a scene. But Stoicism teaches us something radical. Not reacting is reacting. It's a sign of inner control, of knowing that your peace is worth more than your pride, of realizing that responding to chaos only invites more chaos. So when someone tries to trigger you, pull you back into their mess, remind yourself of this. You are not responsible for fixing what you didn't break. You don't owe anyone a performance. And your silence might be the loudest truth of all. A life well lived is the only statement you need. Not posts, not revenge, not even forgiveness if you're not ready. Just a steady, grounded existence. Building, growing, thriving. In fact, let me ask you something. What if you stopped trying to be understood and simply started being unavailable to anything that disturbs your peace? What if, instead of needing closure, you gave yourself permission to close the door without a word? That's not weakness. That's power. True self-worth doesn't announce itself. It doesn't scream or seek validation. It exists in stillness, in how little it needs to explain itself, in how confidently it walks away from what no longer feels right. And when you live that way, when you stop reacting to every jab, every manipulation, every breadcrumb of attention, you become untouchable. That doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've learned that not every feeling deserves an audience. It means you've learned to prioritize your energy, to guard your peace like a sacred space. Because the truth is, you don't need to win the argument. You just need to win your life. So if someone walks out, let them. If they try to come back, let your silence speak louder than your words ever could. Because your highest power isn't in what you say. It's in what you no longer feel the need to say. Let me tell you a true story. Not the kind that ends with fireworks or loud revenge, but the kind that unfolds slowly, in silence, and hits harder than any dramatic ending ever could. There was a man, let's call him David. David had it all: a good job, a tight circle of friends, and someone in his life who truly cared for him. But somewhere along the way, ego got louder than empathy. He cheated, lied, manipulated, and when it all came crashing down, he walked away smug, untouched, convinced he'd gotten away with it. No apology, no guilt, no accountability. In his mind, he was free. And the person he betrayed, devastated, shattered in ways David never saw or never cared to see. But here's the part David never expected. She didn't fight. She didn't beg. She didn't seek revenge. She healed. Day by day, in the quiet, she rebuilt herself piece by piece. She found strength not in proving him wrong, but in proving herself right. Not in talking about him, but in becoming someone he no longer even deserved to speak to. Fast forward 3 years. David's life collapsed not in some grand dramatic downfall, but in a slow erosion of everything he thought was secure. First, he lost his job not because of one mistake, but because of a long trail of broken trust and bad character. Then came the friends, the ones who slowly distanced themselves, not because of gossip, but because they started to see him. And finally, his reputation. That quiet whisper people exchange when your name comes up. Yeah, I don't trust that guy. No explosion, just silence. In that silence, it was louder than any punishment the world could have given him. And her, she had moved on. She had built a life full of peace, purpose, and people who respected her. She didn't even think about him anymore. Not because she hated him, but because he no longer occupied space in her story. That's the thing about betrayal. The people who cause it think they've won because they walked away unharmed. But they never realize the harm they cause is a mirror. And eventually, that mirror turns on them. You can't outrun your character. You might escape consequences for a while, but you can't escape who you are becoming. And when your character starts to rot, your life begins to follow. What Stoicism teaches us is this: you don't have to seek revenge. You don't have to force justice, because sometimes life is the justice. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. That doesn't mean denial. It means deciding that your peace is more valuable than someone else's destruction. It means letting time do what time always does, reveal the truth. So if you've ever been betrayed, if someone walked away thinking they got away with it, take a breath. You don't need to prove them wrong. You just need to keep becoming someone who no longer needs that kind of proof. Because in the end, the person who did the hurting always pays. Not with money, not with public shame, but in that slow, silent collapse that only they feel when they realize they burned a bridge that never leads back, and no one's waiting on the other side. Let your silence be your closure. Let your life speak so loudly they can't ignore what they lost. Even if you never say a word, sometimes collapse doesn't look like chaos. It doesn't come with screaming, public breakdowns, or big dramatic exits. Sometimes it's quiet. So quiet that, at first glance, it almost looks like they're thriving. You know the kind of people I'm talking about. They betrayed you, lied to you, broke your trust. And after all that, they're posting on social media like life's never been better. New selfies, new deep quotes full of vague, cryptic energy. They start posting things like, not everyone deserves a seat at your table, or some people don't value loyalty until it's gone. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of that kind of betrayal, you might look at those posts and wonder, wait, are they talking about me? Why are they acting like they're the victim? But here's the truth. People who are genuinely at peace don't post messages aimed at ghosts. They don't feel the need to prove how okay they are. Because when you're truly okay, you don't have to announce it. That's the first sign they're falling apart. They start talking more because they're feeling more empty. And then it gets even more obvious. Suddenly, their circle of friends changes. The ones who knew the real story, who saw the truth, start to disappear. They're replaced with a new crowd. People who don't ask too many questions, who don't know the full picture. It's not about growth. It's about reinvention out of shame. They think, if I change my environment, maybe I won't have to change myself. But here's what Stoicism reminds us. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. Instead of fixing the character that led them to betray others, they put on a mask, a stronger one, a louder one, a shinier one. But here's the thing about masks. They get heavy. And the longer you wear one, the harder it is to breathe. So what do? They start retelling the story, over and over. But notice their version changes each time. One time, they were forced to make a hard decision. Another time, they were used. Another time, they were protecting their peace. The story keeps shifting not because they're lying to you, but because they're trying to lie to themselves. And the more they talk, the more it reveals what they're trying to hide. Guilt, shame, the quiet ache of knowing they burned a bridge that will never be rebuilt. Here's something I've learned. The more someone needs to prove they're doing great, the less they actually are. Genuine healing is calm. Growth doesn't need applause. Peace doesn't post cryptic messages. If someone hurt you, and now they seem louder, flashier, more opinionated than ever before, pause. That's not strength. That's someone trying to outrun the collapse happening inside. And yes, it's tempting to think they don't deserve to be happy after what they did. But real power isn't in seeing them fall. It's in realizing you don't need them to, because the ones who betray others are always at war with themselves. They might win the short game, the appearance, but in the long game, truth always surfaces. Character always catches up. And peace? Peace always belongs to those who didn't let bitterness consume them. So, if you see signs they're crumbling, let them. You don't have to say a word. You don't have to post your own version of the story. You don't have to prove who was right. Just live. Just grow. Just become someone their memory has no place in anymore. Because the loudest sign of real power is silence. Let them tell stories. Let them wear masks. Let them post. You move on. You heal so deeply, they can't even recognize the version of you they once hurt. And that's the kind of closure life delivers better than anything you could ever say. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is no revenge at all. Not because you're weak, not because you've surrendered, but because you've finally realized it's just not worth it. You don't need to argue. You don't need to expose the truth. You don't need to prove that they were wrong or that you were right, because deep down, you've always known. That's the thing about peace. It's quiet, but powerful. It doesn't show up with fireworks or dramatic speeches. It arrives slowly like the sunrise after a long, dark night. And when it does, you start to see things clearly. All those sleepless nights, all those imaginary conversations, where you finally said everything you wanted to say, all the energy you spent wondering if they even cared, it fades. Not because it didn't matter, but because you've grown beyond the need to make it matter to them. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen someone desperately try to rewrite the story to control the narrative after hurting someone? They'll say you were too sensitive, that you misunderstood, that they were just protecting their peace. But here's what they'll never say out loud. They underestimated your ability to rise. They thought you'd be stuck in the same place, replaying the past, begging for closure. But here you are, healing, quietly, powerfully, becoming someone their words, their betrayal, their absence no longer touch. That's what true peace does. It doesn't scream, "Look how far I've come." It just moves in silence and lets your life speak for itself. As the Stoics would say, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Marcus Aurelius? And what does that mean in real life? It means you don't need to clap back. You don't need to tell your side of the story to everyone who'll listen. You don't need to throw shade or post quotes filled with passive-aggressive subtext. You simply live. You show up with grace. You keep your circle small and your energy protected. You pour into your growth, your peace, your purpose. That is punishment enough. Because while they're still obsessing over how they looked in the story, you've already closed the book. While they're trying to control the narrative, you're out living a life that makes the story irrelevant. And here's the twist. You never had to prove them wrong. You just had to become so right with yourself that their opinion no longer carried any weight. Let them believe what they need to. Let them twist the truth if it makes them sleep better. You rest in peace. Not the kind written in stone, but the kind earned through healing, reflection, and the courage to not let pain turn you bitter. That is the deepest form of justice. It's not loud, it's not public, but it's lasting. Because the one who walks away in silence, not out of fear, but out of strength, is the one who's already won. So if you're still waiting for the perfect moment to say your piece, to prove your worth, to make them regret it all, don't. Let your peace speak for you. Let your life speak for you. Let your peace be the punishment they never saw coming. Because when you choose peace over proving a point, you don't just win the argument, you win your freedom. Let them talk. Let them twist. Let them pretend. Your life, your peace is already telling the truth louder than any words ever could. There's something they can never steal from you. Not even when they lied. Not even when they left. Not even when you were on your knees, crying, breaking, begging to be heard. It's something deeper than pride. It's not about your reputation, your status, or how put together you look on the outside. It's your dignity. And maybe, just maybe, you lost sight of it for a while. Maybe you stayed too long in a situation where you weren't respected. Maybe you kept explaining yourself to someone who had already made up their mind. Maybe you gave chances when what you really needed was distance. But here's what matters. You came back for it, piece by piece, silently, with trembling hands and a bruised heart. But you gathered it anyway. You remembered who you are. As the Stoics would say, calmness is power. Dignity is the container that holds all. Let that sink in. Dignity is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need applause. It's the quiet, grounded strength that whispers, I will not lower myself to match your chaos. Some people confuse dignity with ego, but they're nothing alike. Ego says, I must win. Dignity says, I refuse to lose myself. Ego fights to be right. Dignity walks away when respect is no longer on the table. So yes, maybe you did break down. Maybe you reached out when you should have walked away. Maybe you texted them one more time, even when your gut screamed, don't. That doesn't mean you lost your dignity. It means you're human. But dignity isn't about never falling. It's about what you do after you fall. Do you rise bitter or better? Do you let pain turn you cold or clear? I've seen people reclaim themselves after years in toxic relationships. I've watched friends leave jobs where they were silently disrespected every day. I've known mothers, fathers, survivors who walked away with nothing but the clothes on their back and still carry themselves like royalty. Because dignity, it's not given to you by others. It's something you decide to carry even when no one else sees it. Even when your name has been dragged, even when your kindness was used against you, even when they laughed, thinking they'd broken you for good. But broken isn't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of boundaries, the beginning of self-worth, The beginning of no longer explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone walk away from everything and somehow glow even brighter? That's dignity. It doesn't scream. It doesn't seek revenge. It doesn't post cryptic messages or try to control the narrative. It just moves in silence and rebuilds. And here's the part most people don't talk about. Dignity feels lonely at first. It feels like silence when you're used to noise. It feels like walking alone when you've always had someone beside you, even if that someone wasn't good for you. But over time, that silence becomes peace. That space becomes clarity. And that loneliness, it becomes freedom. So if you've ever felt like you gave away too much of yourself, if you've ever felt embarrassed by how far you bent, how hard you tried, don't. Because that version of you, the one who loved deeply, who hoped despite the pain, who tried again and again, that version had dignity too. But now you're wiser. Now your dignity doesn't have cracks, it has armor. Not the kind that keeps love out, but the kind that keeps disrespect away. So stand tall, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you remembered who you are. And no matter what they did, no matter what they said, they couldn't take that from you. Your calm is your power. Your dignity is your shield. And now you carry both. Let me tell you a story. His name was Elijah. He wasn't the loudest in the room. He didn't stir drama. He didn't gossip. But everyone knew he carried himself with quiet integrity. He worked at a company that, on paper, looked impressive. Big numbers, big talk, big promises. But behind closed doors, it was toxic. Meetings filled with blame. Bosses who thrived on control and fear. A culture that rewarded loyalty to dysfunction and punished anyone who dared to question it. Elijah stayed longer than he probably should have. Not because he didn't see what was happening, but because he believed in giving things a chance. Because, like many of us, he hoped it would get better. Until one day, something inside him just said, enough. He didn't make a scene. He didn't write a dramatic resignation letter. He didn't call anyone out, expose the rot, or try to prove a point. No, he packed up his things, gave a quiet thank you, and walked away with dignity. No closure, no applause, no audience, just a silent exit and a commitment to never shrink himself again. 6 months later, that same company collapsed. Internal chaos, mass resignations, leadership scandals. The same toxicity that once made Elijah doubt himself ended up devouring itself from the inside out. And Elijah? He was thriving, healthier, clearer, stronger, running his own small business, working with people who respected him, not manipulated him. He didn't just survive the storm. He became the calm that comes after it. There's a Stoic lesson here. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Marcus Aurelius. You see, there's a power in walking away without revenge, without bitterness, without dragging anyone's name through the mud. Because when you walk away with grace, you don't carry their poison with you. You leave it behind. Too often, we're taught to fight for explanations, to demand fairness, to expose what was wrong. But not every battle needs to be fought out loud. Sometimes, the most powerful move is to simply withdraw. Quietly, intentionally, unapologetically. Elijah didn't win because he shouted. He won because he stopped playing their game. And that is something we all need to remember. Whether it's a toxic job, a manipulative relationship, or a space where your soul doesn't feel safe, you don't have to burn bridges to prove you're right. You just have to remember your worth and leave. No big statements, no dramatic exits, just your quiet, grounded self walking into a better future. Ask yourself this: what are you staying in right now? Just because walking away feels too quiet? What would happen if you trusted the silence? Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's self-respect. It's the space where your healing begins and their consequences arrive. Elijah never gloated. He didn't check back in to see how bad things got. He didn't need to. Because growth doesn't look back to compare, it looks forward to create. So if you're in a place that drains you, breaks your peace, or makes you forget your value, let Elijah's story remind you. You don't have to stay just to prove a point. Sometimes the most powerful story you'll ever tell is the one where you leave quietly and rise loudly. Dignity doesn't shout, it moves. It chooses peace. It plants new roots. And just like Elijah, when you move with grace, you don't just walk away, you rise. There comes a moment quiet, often invisible to others when you change. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. You wake up one morning and realize you're not angry anymore. You're not heartbroken. You're not trying to make anyone see your worth. You've just moved on. And that, my friend, is where true transformation begins. It's not that you've become cold. It's not that you've shut down or turned bitter. It's simply that your standards have changed. You no longer chase apologies. You no longer accept crumbs and call them love. You no longer explain your boundaries just to be heard. You're not who they used to know. And that confuses people. They'll say you've changed as if that's a bad thing. They'll say you're distant as if closeness should be given unconditionally. Some may even try to come back with apologies, promises, or sweet words wrapped in old patterns. But here's the truth. Just because someone is sorry doesn't mean they belong in your future. They had access to you once, and they wasted it. Now, you've outgrown the version of yourself that tolerated what they offered. That's not cruelty. That's evolution. The Stoics taught, if someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth, not to be right. Marcus Aurelius. But here's the thing, change must be mutual. You've done the work. You've faced your pain, confronted your patterns, rebuilt your values. If they haven't, then their return isn't reconciliation, it's regression. There's something powerful about setting new standards and sticking to them. Not out of pride, not out of punishment, but out of love for yourself. You're no longer available for chaos. You're no longer attracted to intensity disguised as love. You're no longer willing to shrink just to keep someone comfortable. And that scares people who benefited from your old self. Let it. You don't owe anyone the unhealed version of you. Yes, they might apologize. Yes, their words might be genuine. But forgiveness doesn't always mean re-entry. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do for yourself and for them is to say, I hear you, I forgive you, but I've moved on and I'm not turning back. Not out of spite, not to prove anything, but because your peace costs too much to compromise again. So let them call you cold. Let them say you changed. Let them wonder why they can't reach you like they used to. Because they're right. You did change. You became someone who finally knows what they deserve. And here's a question for you. What part of your past still thinks it deserves a place in your present? If you feel guilty for having new standards, remember this. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors with locks. You decide who has the key, and no one is entitled to it just because they once lived inside. You're not the villain for walking away. You're not heartless for not letting them back in. You're just someone who finally realized you're not who you used to be. And that's a beautiful thing. Growth doesn't apologize. It just builds. Quietly, strongly, unshakably. Let them talk about the old you. You're too busy building the new you. There are people who will walk into your life and take more than they give. They'll take your time as if it's endless. They'll take your love without returning it. They'll take your trust and shatter it. And sometimes they leave you wondering if anything you gave was ever enough. But here's the truth. They'll never be able to rewrite. They might have taken parts of your past, but they can't touch your soul. They can't erase your growth. And they sure as hell can't steal your comeback. You see, healing isn't about pretending it never happened. It's about standing up after being knocked down and saying, "You took a lot from me, but not the best parts of me. You still have your mind. You still have your character. And most importantly, you still have the ability to rebuild." That's the part they'll never understand. Some people break others because they're broken inside. They lie, manipulate, betray, thinking it makes them powerful. But real power is in surviving that and still choosing to grow. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to make them see. You just needed to keep going. And you did. In a world that often celebrates noise, drama, and getting the last word, you chose peace. You chose silence. You chose yourself. And that's why you win. The Stoics remind us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. They could take your love and throw it away. They could waste your loyalty and never say thank you. But they could never take your dignity unless you gave it up. And you didn't. You held on to your integrity. You stayed true to your values even when they didn't. And now, you're rising. Maybe you didn't get closure. Maybe they never gave you answers. Maybe the chapter ended mid-sentence. But you learned something most people never do. You don't need closure from them when you found clarity within. Closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your decision to stop bleeding for someone who wouldn't even notice the wound. They don't get to define your story. You do. And your story doesn't end with betrayal, heartbreak, or loss. It ends with you walking away wiser, stronger, and more awake than ever. So if you're still holding on to the pain, ask yourself this: why give someone the power to continue hurting you long after they're gone? Let them keep the lies. Let them keep the silence. Let them keep the version of you they tried to break. You've got better things to build. Your healing, your peace, your future. That's what they can't take. And one day, when they look back, they'll realize they lost the rarest kind of person, not because you weren't enough, but because they didn't know how to value what they had. But by then, you'll be long gone, thriving, at peace, unbothered. You didn't just survive, you evolved. And that's the kind of power no one can take from you. They may have taken pieces of your past, but your future, that belongs to you and only you. Let them go. Reclaim your soul. Walk forward. You already won. Let's be honest. There's a moment after you've been betrayed, abandoned, or disrespected when your mind starts spinning with ways to make them feel what they made you feel. Maybe you've had that thought, what if I just gave them a taste of their own medicine? But then, something deeper inside you speaks. Something calmer, wiser, and it whispers, you don't need revenge. You are the justice. That's not weakness, that's mastery. Because here's the part they never expected. They thought they broke you. They thought they could walk away and you'd crumble. They thought you'd beg, chase, or lash out. But instead, you rose, quietly, steadily, without making a scene. And that silence, that's what shook them the most. You didn't just move on, you elevated. You outgrew their chaos. You became something they could never reach, not because you wanted to hurt them, but because you finally realized your worth. That's the kind of revenge they never see coming. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Marcus Aurelius. Think about that for a second. The best revenge isn't to match their cruelty. It's to live in a way they never could. To protect your peace instead of destroying theirs. To choose growth over grudges. To become so grounded, so unshakable, that nothing they do can pull you back into that storm. You see, people who harm others often live in cycles. They hurt, manipulate, and deceive because they never learned how to confront their own emptiness. But when you step out of that cycle, when you no longer respond, retaliate, or react, you break it. And that is justice. True justice is silent. It's not served with anger, but with elevation. It's when you become untouchable, not because you fought back, but because you refused to descend. They expected drama. You gave them distance. They expected chaos. You gave them calm. They expected war. You gave them silence. And that silence, it echoed louder than any scream. You see, there's something deeply painful for the person who tried to destroy you in watching you thrive without them. Not because you wish them pain, but because your growth reminds them of everything they refused to become. When you glow in peace, when you choose dignity over drama, when you walk away not to escape but to evolve, that's when you win. And more importantly, that's when you heal. This isn't about being better than anyone. It's about being better than who you used to be. So no, you don't need to make them pay. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need a final word, a public closure, or a revenge plan. You just need to keep building a life so full of purpose, peace, and power that their memory fades into nothing but a lesson. Because in the end, the person who hurt you, they already lost the moment they lost you. You don't need justice. You are the justice. You are the proof that pain can't kill spirit. That betrayal can't block purpose. That silence can be strength, and that peace can be power. So the next time you're tempted to get back at someone, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, is this who I want to become, or am I here to rise above it? Choose elevation. Choose clarity. Choose becoming so whole that not even your shadow wants to look back. That's not just stoicism. That's freedom. You don't need revenge. You don't even need their apology. You need only this, the quiet knowing that you won the moment you chose peace over pain. You are no longer what they tried to reduce you to. You've already become everything they'll never be. And that, my friend, is the ultimate justice.